For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh. Today it's Friday, and we're talking about something freaky other than Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis. This is Freaky Tales. Tales is an anthology that tells the story of a night in Oakland, California in 1987 and some weird shenanigans that take place. I'll talk about it in just a few seconds, but think Pulp Fiction or a Trick or Treat in terms of type of anthology where all the stories are interconnected. And while we are on the topic of cohesion, I just want to get this out there first. My biggest gripe or battle with this film is just that. So this film was presented in 4 chapters, and throughout these chapters you kind of meet different characters. As the movie progresses, you start to see characters from previous stories kind of intersect, and kind of the movie starts to come round circle like it does in Pulp Fiction, as that's why I made that comparison. But this movie is far from the brilliance of Pulp Fiction. And I have a love-hate relationship with this because there are certain things that take place or transpond that don't necessarily make this feel like it's a lack of cohesion, but it just feels like a lazy attempt to bring cohesion. Case in point, there is a segment in this movie that follows a rap duo as they are getting ready to face off against a rap local legend in Oakland in front of their crowd to kind of get their big break, and climaxes with said performance. And I'm not saying that as illustrating that as a weak point of the film, but they just don't feel like they belong in any other part of the story. They feel like they kind of stick out, and there are other elements that are like that. The first tale kind of feels like that. They try to tie it into the fourth tale a little bit, but I bring up Danger Zone, the rap duo, just because they kind of seem to stick out the worst. But they also happen to have my favorite segment in this entire film. And it's also worth mentioning that if they hadn't been featured more, we probably would not have gotten that kick-ass music video at the end of this movie. So there's that. But honestly, I think the cohesion, this film just doesn't know what it wants to be. And that's kind of my biggest love-hate relationship with this entire film, because this film is fun as hell, but also on the other side, when you're looking at it from a perspective of objection, the way that I'm trying to do for the sake of this video, it is kind of a mess. There are parts of this movie that feel like a crime thriller a la Goodfellas. There are parts of this movie that kind of feel like it's trying to embrace a sci-fi edge to it. Never really expands on said sci-fi edge. There are elements of it that feel funny. There are elements of it that feel horror. There are elements of it that just feel downright uncomfortable. And if this film is trying to genre bend, it does a very poor job at it. But herein lies the hope, because as I said, this movie is fun as hell. And this movie is kind of one of those movies that is not necessarily inherently bad, but rather misguided. And so I won't say it's so bad it's good, but it's so misguided that it just accidentally ends up being a good film that has short films in it, that has great acting, great writing, great lighting. And I love the way that this also shifts from kind of its ratios to feel modern, but also a throwback to the 80s, and it really embraces a lot of that nostalgia feel to it, and also embraces the way that we've kind of progressed in terms of modern viewing. Tom Hanks, though, probably steals the show, hands down. Seeing Tom Hanks in a role like this, he has maybe 5 minutes in this entire movie, and it's such an anomaly in his career. I would love to know how they got him for this movie, but he's excellent in it. He is fantastic. Jay Ellis, Ben Mendelsohn, and Pedro Pascal, and I've already talked about the rap segment in this, but actresses Normani as well as Dominique Thorne, just they give, I think their dynamic just kind of stole the show for me on top of Hanks. Just every performance here just really is so much fun to watch, and it kind of borders this line between just really solid acting and kind of campy, the way that the tone of this film kind of just is set. Even if it doesn't know a genre, it knows the tone it's going for, and that's something that I can respect for it. Before I give my rating, this is the last thing I will say about genre. I really wish this film would have expanded its science fiction elements. This film had such an opportunity to create something that could have connected all of these stories in a really weird and fun way. Not to say that this movie, again, isn't fun. It's flawed, but it's still fun. I think that they would have just really, I think this rating would be a lot higher if it wasn't for the science fiction element falling flat. But let's get right into the Rorschach rating scale, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and give Freaky Tales a 3.5 out of 5 overall. I think this movie is very fun, very flawed. This movie does not know the genre that it is trying to be, and if it is trying to bend genres, it does a fairly terrible job at it, but performances across the board save it. It has dynamic stories to be told here, even if they do lack cohesion sometimes. But again, this is just a really fun film, and it's a really unique anthology that I think will be talked about and will go down as a cult classic. All right, if you guys have seen Freaky Tales, what did you guys think about it? Comment below, let me know. Let me know what segment was your favorite too. Let's talk about mental health, shall we? If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we will take a theme of mental health out of the film, which we're talking about, open it up for a few minutes in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. I talked about my favorite segment in this movie being the Danger Zone, which is the rap kind of dynamic that tells the story of this up-and-coming rap duo. One is really confident and one struggles with their self-confidence, and I love that dynamic. But one of the things that I really love and was so satisfying about that is the one that lacks with struggles really bad in her kind of arc throughout the course of it is played by hip-hop star, ironically, Normani, and she does such a great job. But there's this satisfying payoff at the end where she kind of realizes that she had the power in her all along, and that's really the thing that I want to kind of talk about, expand upon for a few minutes. Honestly, for as cliche as this film and specifically that art can get, and as cliche as the things that I'm getting ready to talk about, having that power in you all along type of pep talk, it's been done before, but that's because there is truth in that. And I speak that to someone who gives themselves that conversation and that pep talk on a daily basis, and sometimes multiple times a day, to where I have to remind myself that A, I am enough, and that B, that I can do anything that I set my mind to, even if it takes some time to research the things that I want to do and how to do them, but also understanding that I am only limited by my own capabilities. And even if there are hurdles, we live in an age now where we have things like YouTube and TikTok that teach us how to find price alternatives to really set those goals in mind. There are websites designed to set up to deliver education or resources like the mental health resource library that we have right in the show notes below. If you happen to be struggling with depression, suicide, addiction, self-harm, or anything else that just affects your mental health. I grew up in the metalcore scene, and one of the things that I just feel quotes from that era of my life that I want to speak right now, just it comes from a band called For Today, and they said the only threat is my apathy. The only thing that holds me back is me. And so reaffirm yourself. Take time out of your day to really reaffirm and say, to allow yourself to have self-care, because self-care is important. Allow yourself to be able to feel things, and allow yourself the goals, and set up goals and challenge yourself to grow and you'll find and you'll surprise yourself what you are actually capable of. Once again, in the show notes below, you guys will find links to our mental health resource library. I really hope that for some of you guys watching this, that might be a first start to self-care, and it's a very important, very bold, and brave thing for you to do. Stay with us and believe in yourself. Freaky Tales is now playing in theaters everywhere from Lionsgate and eOne Entertainment. In the show notes below, you guys will find, as I mentioned, our mental health resource library, that follow button, ways to support us financially, as well as our social media and podcast network, as well as more movie reviews like this. Until next time, remember to keep it classy and have yourself a great weekend.